Dzogchen, the Self-Perfected State, by Chögyal Namkhai Norbu. Chapter 3, The Path of Self-Liberation. The Dzogchen teachings are also known as Ati Yoga or Primordial Yoga. The word yoga is used here with the sense that it has in the equivalent Tibetan term Nalyor, which means possessing the authentic condition. This condition being the primordial state of each individual. A further name for Dzogchen is the teaching of the state of mind of Samantabhadra, or primordial enlightenment. The method practiced in the path of Dzogchen is called self-liberation because it is based on knowledge and understanding. But it is not that there is some object that has to be known. Rather, it is a matter of entering into the experience of a state beyond the reasoning mind, the state of contemplation. There is no way to begin to understand this state, however, if one does not take the mind as one's starting point. That is why the path of self-liberation is said to be more linked to the factor of mind than the paths of renunciation and transformation. In Dzogchen, introduction is given directly to the inherent state of the individual by means of an explanation of the primordial base of existence, which is the original condition of all beings. In both the sutras and the tantras, one of the fundamental concepts discussed is that of the nature of the mind, the true condition of the mind, which is beyond the limits of the intellect and of time. The basic principle here is that of voidness, or shunyata, the central doctrine of the Mahayana. The meaning of the term voidness, as it is used in the Prajnaparamita, is the absence of substantiality, or of self-nature, of all phenomena, which is the real, inherent condition of all existence. When referring to the individual, this condition is referred to as the nature of the mind. In the Dzogchen teachings, many terms are used to denote the nature of the mind, including the primordial base, the base of everything, the essence of primordial bodhicitta, and so on. The last term is found in many ancient Dzogchen texts, and it will be useful to explain its meaning. In the Mahayana, bodhicitta is taken as meaning the commitment based on a feeling of universal compassion to bringing all beings to enlightenment. Two types of bodhicitta are spoken of in particular, relative and absolute. The relative bodhicitta consists of the training of one's thoughts to develop the intention to benefit others and the actual carrying out of altruistic actions. The absolute bodhicitta is the knowledge of the voidness of all phenomena and comes close to the concept of primordial bodhicitta in Dzogchen. When translated into Tibetan, bodhicitta becomes Chang Chupsam, a term made up of three words: Chang, which means purified, Chub, which means perfected, and Sem, which means mind. Mind stands for the nature of the mind. Purified means that all obstacles and negatives have been purified, and perfected means that all the attainments and qualities have been realized. So the primordial bodhicitta is the state of the individual, which is from the very beginning without obstacles, perfect, and includes as its potentiality all the various manifestations of energy. It is a condition which is beyond time, beyond dualism, pure and perfect, like the nature of the mirror. If one is ignorant of it, however, it is not manifest, and it becomes necessary to remove the provisional obstacles that obscure it. In the Dzogchen teachings, the primordial state of the base is not defined only as being void, but is explained as having three aspects or characteristics, called the three primordial wisdoms: essence, nature, and energy. The essence is the void, the real condition of the individual of all phenomena. This base is the condition of all individuals, whether they are aware of it or not, whether they are enlightened or in transmigration. It is said to be pure from the beginning, because like space, it is free of all impediments and is the basis of all manifestations in existence. The manifestation of the primordial state in all its aspects, its clarity, on the other hand, is called the nature. It is said to be self-perfected because it exists spontaneously from the beginning, like the sun which shines in space. Clarity is the pure quality of all thought and of all perceived phenomena, uncontaminated by mental judgment. For example, when we see a flower, we first perceive its image without the mind entering into judgment, even if this phase of perception only lasts for a fraction of a second. Then in a second phase, mental judgment enters into the situation, and one categorizes the perception thinking, that's a flower, it's red, it has a special scent, and so on. Developing from this, attachment and aversion, acceptance and rejection, all arise, with the consequent creation of karma and transmigration. Clarity is the phase in which perception is vivid and present, but the mind has not yet entered into action. It is the spontaneous manifestation of the individual's state. The same is true for thoughts. If you don't follow them and don't become caught up in mental judgment, they too are part of our natural clarity. The third of the three primordial wisdoms is energy. Its characteristic is that it manifests without interruption. The explanation of energy in Dzogchen is fundamental to understand the base. All dimensions, whether pure or impure, material or subtle, are manifestations of one aspect or another of energy. To explain how both transmigration and enlightenment originate, three ways in which energy manifests are described. These three modes of energy are called Tsel, Roba, and Dang, names that cannot be translated into Western languages. To understand the manifestation of energy as Tsel, we can take the example of what happens when a crystal ball is placed near a window. The crystal is pure and transparent, but when rays of light strike it, they refract into colored lights all around the room. These lights are not inherent to the crystal itself, but manifest when the appropriate secondary cause is present, in this case the sun's rays. The crystal ball symbolizes the primordial state of the individual, which consists of essence, nature, and energy. The colored rays, which spread in a room, are an example of the natural manifestation of energy, appearing in relation to the individual as an object. In the moment of the manifestation of the energy of the primordial state, if one recognizes it as a projection of one's own original qualities, one recognizes oneself in the dimension of pure vision. If the opposite happens, and one perceives the rays and colors as being external to oneself, one manifests impure vision. Thus the cause of both visions, samsara and nirvana, is the same, the manifestation of the light of the primordial state. As an example of rolpa, we should imagine that instead of the colors reflecting externally to the crystal, this time they reflect inside it, not appearing outside the crystal, but within its own surfaces. In the same way, the energy of the primordial state can manifest within its own dimension subjectively in relation to the individual. This happens, for example, in the bardo, the intermediate state between death and rebirth, when 100 peaceful and wrathful divinities appear. They're not external to the individual, but are manifestations of his or her natural self-perfected qualities. The appearance of these divinities, however, only arises for those who have in their lifetime received transmission from a master and applied the method of transformation specific to the peaceful and wrathful divinities. For an ordinary being, there arises only the manifestation of sounds, rays, and lights, which may last only for an instant, and most often are a cause of alarm. For this reason, great importance is given in Tantrism to knowledge of the motive energy of Rolpa, which is the basis of all various methods of transformation. To understand Dang, we should think of the crystal itself and of its pure and transparent form. If we put a crystal ball at the center of a colored mandala and walk around it, the crystal will by turns appear to assume the colors of the cardinal points of the mandala at which we successively arrive, while at the same time remaining in itself pure and transparent. This is an example of the inherent condition of the energy itself as it really is, in any kind of manifestation whatsoever. Sometimes instead of dang, the term gyan is used, meaning ornament, because in the state of contemplation, all manifestations of energy are perceived as ornaments of the primordial state. When the introduction has been given by the master, the essence, nature, and energy are called the three bodies of the base. They correspond in the path to three aspects or characteristic conditions of the nature of the mind: the calm state, movement, and presence. Calm state, gnas pa, movement, gyu pa, and presence, rig pa. The calm state is the condition of the mind in which no thoughts arise. An example of this is the space that exists between the disappearing of one thought and the arising of another, a space that is usually imperceptible. The movement is the manifestation of thoughts without interruption. An example is given in which the state without thoughts is said to be like a calm lake, and the rising of thoughts to be like the movement of fish in a lake. These two factors are common to all beings. Presence, on the other hand, is as if asleep in us, and it takes a master to awaken it through transmission. Presence is the pure recognition without judgment of either the calm state or the movement. These three are called the three bodies of the path. In a fruit or realization, they manifest as Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, the three purified dimensions. The Dharmakaya corresponds to the condition of the essence, the voidness of all phenomena. However, presence here is totally awakened. The state of the Dharmakaya is beyond form or color, like limitless space. The Sambhogakaya is the self-perfected dimension of the manifestation of energy. It corresponds to the natural clarity of the base linked to presence. The Nirmanakaya is the dimension of manifestation, whether pure or impure, perceived as an object in relation to one's own state, although there is no longer remains any trace of dualism. Presence is totally integrated with the external dimension. No matter how many analyses one does, one should not forget that one is always referring to one's own condition, to the aspects of one's own body, voice, and mind. If one tries to understand the teaching with this attitude, whatever explanation one receives will be meaningful and will not remain something abstract. I remember when I was a boy in Tibet, I studied in depth a commentary on the Prajnaparamita Sutra and became expert in expounding on its content. But I didn't succeed in understanding its real meaning because all the descriptions it contained of the different levels of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas seemed to me to be totally apart from my own condition. My college teacher probably noticed this because one day he said to me, "When you read these descriptions of the Buddhas and so on, you should understand that they are descriptions of your own condition." I tried to put his advice into practice, but I found it extremely difficult. It was only some years later, when I came to have knowledge of Dzogchen, that I understood the meaning of my college master's words. Then, when I reread that text, it was as if I was reading it for the first time, and it had a whole new meaning for me. The practice of Dzogchen is based on two fundamental aspects of the nature of the individual: the calm state and the movement of thought through which it is necessary for one to find oneself integrated in the state of presence. In some Buddhist traditions, much importance is given to meditation in order to find oneself in a calm state, known as shinai, the goal of which is to relax the mind into a condition without thoughts or not disturbed by their movement. Sometimes, however, there is danger that one will become sleepy in such states and thus block the progress in a practice. For this reason, it is considered important in the Dzogchen teachings to know how to work with the energy of this movement itself, which is an inherent aspect of the individual. In Tantrism, too, practice is based on working with the movement, but in this case on an imaginary movement created by the mind. The goal here, however, is not to find a peaceful state without thought. Rather, through working with one's imagination, one creates the pure dimension of the mandala, the beginnings with the elements of air, water, fire, and so on. This activity is movement, but until one realizes the Mahamudra, one cannot easily succeed in integrating one's own energy with the ordinary movement of the material dimension. In Dzogchen too, various methods of using energy are practiced, but these are not based on the activity of the mind. Their principle is direct integration of the manifestations of energy with the state of presence. It makes no difference whether there appears before one's mind the pure vision of a mandala, or there appears before one's eyes the karmic vision of a room. Both are regarded as parts of one's clarity. Whether one finds oneself in a calm state or in a pure manifestation of movement, these are both experiences and are not the state of contemplation in itself. In the state of presence, which remains the same in relation to thousands of different experiences, whatever arises liberates itself automatically. This is what is meant by self-liberation. This self-liberation is exactly what has to be applied in one's conduct in daily life. Taking the example of the passion of anger, we have described the different ways in which a practitioner of the path of renunciation and a practitioner of the path of transformation will react. We have also said that the transformation of the passions into wisdoms, which is the method of the Tantras, requires a higher level of capacity, which is the result of many years of training. In a concept of transformation, however, there still remains a sense of dualism. That is to say, there is on the one hand a passion and on the other, its transformation into wisdom. But a practitioner of Dzogchen, in a moment of becoming angry, attempts neither to block nor to transform the passion, but observes it without judging it. In this way, the anger will dissolve by itself, as if it had been left in its natural condition, allowing it to liberate of itself. In general, when a thought or a passion arises, one can distinguish two distinct phases. In the first, there arises the movement of anger, for example, and in the second, one lets oneself get involved in a mental judgment and enters into action. To apply the method of self-liberation, it is important to observe the moment in which the mind has not yet entered into judgment. When one maintains the state of presence, any thought or movement, whatever, can be compared to a cloud as big as an egg, which gets bigger little by little until it becomes as big as a mountain, and finally, in the same way that it arose, gets smaller and smaller again until it disappears altogether. Knowledge of the state of self-liberation is the foundation of the practice of Dzogchen. It is said that the practitioner of Dzogchen meditates without meditating, which seems to be just a play on words, but is really true. The most important thing is never to become distracted, maintaining the state of presence in every moment. There is a story that tells how a learned monk went to visit Yuntan, a Dzogchen master who lived simply, surrounded by a large number of disciples. The monk, who had studied Buddhist doctrines for years and felt himself to be learned in a grip of jealousy, thought, "How does he, an ordinary person, dare to teach?" How dare he pretend to be a master if he doesn't even wear monk's robes? I will go and confront his knowledge with mine and humiliate him in front of his disciples, so that they will leave him and follow me. Full of pride and arrogance, he went to Yuntan and asked him, "You practitioners of Dzogchen, are you always meditating?" To which Yuntan replied, "What is there to meditate on?" "So," the monk continued, "you don't meditate then?" Yuntan replied, "When am I ever distracted?